You're listening to the Complete Human podcast, hosted by co-founders Janna Breslin and Evan DeMarco. We share authentic conversations about wellness, longevity, personal growth, and biooptimization, along with inspiring stories that encourage community and social responsibility. We hope you enjoy this episode.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the Complete Human podcast with your hosts,
Janna Breslin
and Evan DeMarco. We are once again here in my backyard in Sacramento, California. And today we're going to talk about a couple different things, mainly biooptimization. And so biooptimization for us was born out of this idea that there are better long-term solutions to some of the fundamental problems that we face in health and wellness. And when we started to look at that, we came up with these 4 pillars of biooptimization, the 4 pillars of health and wellness, and we're going to talk a lot about those. First of which is being mental fortitude. Second of which is we can play back and forth here.
Okay, cool. Right. One of them is planetary connection.
Planetary connection, yes, and that's the last one. The second one is physical health.
And then spiritual abundance.
Spiritual abundance. And we use New Year's resolutions is kind of the model for understanding the 4 pillars of biooptimization. And the best way to understand this is go into the gym on January 2nd. And it's packed, right? Everybody's got their New Year's resolutions. They're on a treadmill. They're working out. By March 1st, it's back to normal. So 80 to 90% of those New Year's resolutions, which were based off of exercise, health, and wellness, fail. And what we found time and time again is that they fail because of mental fortitude. The driving force for someone to get into the gym is the recognition that they've got a health concern that they want to address. Maybe it's being overweight. Maybe it's family history of cardiovascular disease. Whatever the impetus is to get them into the gym, most people fundamentally don't address the underlying issue, which is the mental fortitude piece. So until we address that, then the physical health doesn't mean anything. Now, once we get to physical health, that usually hopefully transpires us or inspires us to open up more of a spiritual abundance journey. It's what is our connection to people? What are we doing? Why are we doing things? It's our why. And then once we get to the spiritual abundance, that leads us into this place of planetary connection. It's the recognition that we're all connected in some capacity, right? We all want to be happy. We all want to see our family happy. We all want health. We all want wellness. And now at a time in our history with COVID looming over all of us, these tenets, these 4 pillars of biooptimization are more important than ever.
Agreed.
So we wanted to talk about this, and we're going to talk a lot about this in the podcast. We've got some amazing guests lined up who are going to help us kind of dive deep into some of these categories. But mental fortitude is one that I think you and I wanted to address. And I wanted to take it back to a time in my life that I really had to reset my definition of mental fortitude. And it was right after my divorce. And so for me, it was kind of interesting, right? Married, had a kid. I'm on this path. And this path had me mentally focused on a specific outcome. It was, my wife and I are giving away our daughter at her wedding. We're standing up next to each other at her high school, her college graduation. We're doing all of these things that are kind of this model of what we've come to expect from marriage. And when that didn't happen through my divorce, my world fell apart. And when that world fell apart, I lost a sense of direction. I lost a sense of what I was supposed to be. I lost a sense of who I was as a human being. And it took me a while to recognize that the work that I put into myself, the mental fortitude, not the physical, not the connections, not the spiritual stuff, but the daily mental fortitude to wake up, to start journaling, to see a therapist, to do all the things that mentally allowed me to get to the next step were the catalyst for the success that I achieved after my divorce. And it's funny where I think a lot of people go through these processes, right? 50 to 60% of all people who get married are going to get divorced. And of course, no one thinks when they're getting married that they're going to be getting divorced. You sign up for your wedding to live and be with that person forever. Till death do you part. Of course. Yeah. And this brings up a whole interesting conversation, which we'll dive into in a second, right? Is marriage a viable option? And we've got someone that we're going to interview coming up here pretty soon that's written a very interesting book on this subject. So, but anyway, back to the ideas is like when we lose that sense of direction, we lose our sense of selves, and it's the daily work that kind of allows us to crawl out of that hole. And what I found is that work never ends. And I think the challenge that most people have in this world is that they think that, oh, well, I saw a therapist for 3 to 4 months. Now I'm good. I journaled for a couple weeks. I'm good. I picked up meditation. I do it, every now and then. And what happens, and what I found in actually interviewing people through another podcast, Single Parents Daily, is that divorce starts to create this wave effect where people they'll start to do the things, the mental fortitude pieces, and they'll get to a certain point where they're happy and they're content and they've got a sense of direction. And then they stop doing the things that got them there. And then they start to fall off. Something, tragic happens. Another relationship ends. Something happens. There's a catalyst. And it's not until they kind of reach the bottom of that wave that they start to do those things again. And so what we're finding in mental fortitude is that it's the constant daily practice of doing something that really allows us to stay consistent in our elevated trajectory. So that was, I think that as we talk about mental fortitude, I wanted to bring that up and really, help people understand what we mean by that. And my divorce was the catalyst, right? It was, okay, I've got to sit down every day and look at myself in the mirror and figure out, what do I need to work on? How do I work on that? How do I honor my relationship with my daughter? How do I honor my relationship with my ex-wife, who's the mother of my daughter? How do I build myself into the person that I need to be, independent of being married? And how do I forge a path forward that allows me to be a happy, somewhat productive member of society?
And I think, there's so many traumas that people go throughout life. And I would say I've read something along the lines of, divorce is up there with, a death in the family, losing a job. These are traumatic, painful events that encourage people to really look at themselves and practice this idea of mental fortitude, right? I mean, and now we're in another situation where you throw maybe a pandemic on top of it.
Yeah.
And
an annual pandemic.
Exactly. So I get you. I mean, it's these moments, it's these like traumatic events, it's these painful, situations in our lives that really force us to take a look at who we are and work on that at a deeper level.
And the recognition that out of that comes, if we do it properly, out of that experience, out of that trauma, comes the next stage of our evolution, the next stage of our existence, where if we really do the work, the mental fortitude work properly, it can set us up for a success that we didn't have prior to those traumas. And divorce is a perfect example, right? A pandemic is a perfect example. We're all dealing with this insane amount of trauma right now. And so how do we practice mental fortitude in a way that allows us to not only just survive it, but thrive it? And I will say this, interestingly enough, in interviewing a ton of people for the Single Parents Daily podcast, one of the things that a lot of people talk about in divorce is that it's worse than a death in the family. And the reason is that
it ends, but they're still there.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like when someone dies, they die, and you get to begin the grieving process. When you divorce, it's the death of the marriage, but that person is still there. And if you have kids, if you have, a dog that you're sharing, if you're tied to that person, social media, right? If you're tied to that person on social media, you don't have the ability to grieve in the way that a death allows you to. So it becomes this long, drawn-out process. And one of the things that we've really tried to focus on in crafting some of the language for Complete Human in the book, The 4 Pillars of Epigenetic Change, which you guys can get online here pretty soon, we really wanted to craft some language and some structure that allowed people to create methods to practice mental fortitude and allow that to get them to the second pillar, which is the physical health and wellness. So I guess that brings up an interesting question, right? When you talk or when you think about mental fortitude, what do you do?
Well, I will admit this time in my life, I have been forced to figure out what mental fortitude is. I got divorced this year, you guys. This is something that I've kind of like kept a little bit behind the scenes, but I am also going through a divorce and soon to be divorced. And is this
the first official airing of that news?
Yeah, if I haven't posted it maybe on social before this airs, then yeah, this will be the first official
time warp of
announcement.
podcasting.
Exactly.
Like when do we tape? When does it air?
I know.
So
it's a mystery, but
thank you for sharing that. And I guess I'm going to say two things.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'm sorry. And two, congratulations. And we'll talk about why I said that in a second, but please continue.
Yeah. Well, back to mental fortitude. I mean, this year has forced everyone to really take a deeper look at themselves, their life, how they're living, what they're doing to be the best member of society that they can. And so when you throw these painful moments and these traumas on like one on top of another, you are forced to find where your mental fortitude is. You're forced. It's like you've got to either face it and dig deep and try your hardest to just get yourself into a healthier, better mental spot, or you just let it consume you. And this year it's been a little bit of a struggle for me, but through that struggle, I have been able to find help and centeredness and a groundedness, which has been, it's been kind of beautiful for me to witness, actually, because I've noticed myself changing and, becoming a better person throughout this. So, and of course it's hard, it's painful. These are not easy topics, and this is not something that's like, nice to throw in there with, a pandemic and, lots of other like health issues and just stuff, right? But, it's through these things that really encourage you and teach you how to be resilient and strong and really gain that mental fortitude. So
what are you doing specifically? What does that look like for you?
Well, I started therapy for the first time in my life. This is new for me. I just turned 30 years old this year, in February. And, this is the first time in my life that I've ever gone to therapy. And, I always used to kind of think like, therapy, it's like, if you go there, you're weak and you need help and, you have bigger issues than anyone. And like,
where is that belief structure born from?
It's a great question. I mean, I think, I don't know, maybe even in movies and stuff, like when there's like therapy, sessions going on in movies, it's always like just so dramatic too. But like throughout this process, I've realized therapy is tremendously helpful for anyone. We're all going through stuff. Like therapy is not just for people who are going through tough times. Like sometimes you just need to talk and vent and process life at your own speed. And sometimes it's you sometimes you have more freedom to do so when it's with someone who's not like a friend or a family member. And don't get me wrong, I have leaned on my friends and family for everything this year too. But I will also say that therapy has been very helpful for me. And unfortunately, what I've realized, my biggest learning lesson with therapy right now has been, usually I feel like people, end up choosing to go to therapy because they are like, okay, well, I'm going through something really tough and I want to talk to someone about it. Right. But what I've realized is that through that process, it's not like you go there and you talk about this one topic in your life and then you have relief. It's like you are digging deep, you're getting into the layers, into the dark corners of yourself and your life that you didn't want to address. You're facing really hard parts of yourself, and you're looking at yourself and you're really challenged to be like, okay, is this who I want to be? Is this who I want to be in the future? And am I proud? Like, is this someone I'd be proud of? If I didn't change anything right now, is this someone I would still be proud of in the future? And so, I mean, therapy has been great. But it's really hard because you're forced to look at yourself in ways that you've probably been avoiding your whole life.
Here's something fascinating, right? In our society, and especially in the U.S., we tend to look at mental health, physical health, in so many other ways as kind of reactive. It's the same way with a lot of people in their cars. Well, I'm not going to take it to the mechanic until the brakes are squealing. Well, at that point, there's a major problem. So if we do preventative maintenance in mental health, which is you don't have to have a problem to go to therapy.
Right.
You can learn very valuable tools when you are in a good place that will allow you to be better prepared for the bad times. And we're all going to have those, right? And the challenge is that so many people go to these self-help books. Well, guess what? Yourself is not a qualified professional. Even the qualified professionals, the therapist, one of the tenets of therapy is that the therapists go to therapy. Because oftentimes you can't see the forest through the trees, right? So, going to therapy is a huge thing that we highly recommend you do, even if you're happy, right? Like, figure your
You never know what'll come up and what things you're still battling, even though you think you've moved past that.
Yeah, and more than anything, you're just adding tools to the toolbox to allow you to proactively be able to deal with a hard situation once that comes up. And it's the same with physical, right? Like, why do we have to wait until we're sick to go to the doctor? One of the things that we really advocate for in the physical element of the 4 pillars is diagnostic testing before there's a problem.
Right.
Blood work, start to look at your microbiome, start to look at all of the indicators. Look, COVID right now is going after people with diabetes. One of the articles that I read in the New York Times today was that the disproportionate number of deaths in the United States can be directly attributed, at least in theory at this point, to the obesity rate that seems to be more epidemic in the United States versus any of the other, civilized countries in the world.
And could we say that that is also, severely overweightness?
Oh, totally.
People equals more inflammation in the body. And then if you have more inflammation in the body, it's harder to fight off things like viruses, diseases,
yeah, absolutely.
sickness. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? So, we have problems and we're not looking at intelligent ways to address those, right? So why wait until you've got COVID and you've got a cytokine storm before you're dealing with this shit? Go to the doctor, get the blood work, optimize your physical health, optimize your diet, understand the pillars and the roadmap to getting healthy so that you don't, you're not one of the 146,000, plus people who are succumbing to this virus.
And I have to say, like, kind of just speaking to everyone here, a lot more recently, I've heard that, some people are maybe even in like their 50s, 60s, and they have never had blood work done before. And I know there are people out there that also haven't had blood work done, and maybe you're younger, but I just want to encourage people to do that. And yeah, it can be scary because you might find some things in there that like you might not want to see, or that there's something wrong and you're just trying to avoid the situation. But like, speaking of mental fortitude, we got to be strong and we got to face the issues in our lives and, get that blood work and look at your health and make sure it's optimal, because we believe we can live to 150 years old, and that's the goal, right? And in order to do that, you got to make sure that, your levels are good. Your levels are good.
Yes. We read an article that said that the first person to live to be 1,000 has already been born. Whether that's,
isn't that on our website?
It might be. Go to CompleteHuman.com to find out.
Plug.
Today's episode is brought to you by us.
Yes.
No, it's 150, 1,000, right? Like, now, granted, there's going to need to be some radical technological advancement to get someone to 1,000, whether that's nanobots, in the blood system, whether that's, freezing your telomeres so that they don't shorten. I mean, who knows, right? Like, we'll talk to some smarter people than us to figure that one out. But back to mental fortitude, back to your divorce. Because I know you quickly
ran away from that.
Yeah. So,
well, you asked me, like, what am I doing?
What else besides therapy?
Encourage mental fortitude. So therapy has been great because it's given me tools to kind of process stuff, how to manage my, emotions. And I've struggled with a decent amount of anxiety a lot of my life, and it's been at its highest ever, I would say, recently, just through, the changes just in everyone's lives around right now, and then adding some health issues on top of it, and then a divorce and just moving multiple times. It's been a little much, but as far as, after therapy, I would say that meditation and journaling and reading has helped me tremendously. You guys, I swear by this. So many of us, when we wake up, we reach for our phone, right? Like, that's usually the first thing we do is we wake up, we reach for our phone, we check our notifications, our emails, texts, anything, social media. And what a horrible way to start the day, honestly. If you really think about it, I mean, take some time for yourself and really center and ground yourself and find yourself in a very peaceful and optimistic state of mind before you go into your day. And that's one thing that I've learned through this. And that's what I do. I wake up, I make coffee immediately because we need coffee. Because we need coffee. And then I sit outside and I will do a meditation for about 15 minutes. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, depending on the day and, what I need. Sometimes I even do breathing exercises aside from, just meditating. So, and then I go straight into journaling. And so I will write a page on what I'm grateful for, what my intention is for the day, and then affirmations, which has been really helpful. And I know that it has been helpful because I can look through the progression of my journaling and just kind of what I've been writing, and I notice shifts in myself that are indicative of healing and just being in a more centered, grounded place, which feels really good. And of course, healing and progressing in these times is not always linear. And that's one thing I've absolutely realized. Sometimes you have a really, really freaking bad day after a really good day. And that's okay, because that's life. And that this is what we all have to go through, is these shifts and changes. And then but having that mental fortitude to process those things and to move forward. That's been the biggest learning curve for me, I think. And then I've been reading a lot of, personal development books, self-help, and also business books, because we have started a business and I want to be such a badass business entrepreneur. So I'm doing my best over here.
We started a couple businesses.
Yeah.
Which is why we're not sleeping much.
Right.
I definitely want to come back to what you said about checking your phone first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I did a research project on this one, and what we found is that people check their phone before they get up and go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. So you get lost in the same chemical signaling pathways that gambling does, or porn, or some of these other things that happen in your brain. The simple act of scrolling through social media is like pulling the lever on a slot machine, right? You're just, what am I going to see next? What am I going to see next? What's going to happen next? So in doing such, we've set ourselves up for such a horrific day that way.
Horrific. Just horrific. I do have to agree, though.
And I've noticed, we've talked a little bit about this, is that your hiatus from social has really allowed you the space to heal in kind of this.
Yeah, right. And I actually kind of forgot about that. I mean, I did take a decent amount of time off social, and I think that has also been very good, because there's a lot you see on social media these days, Corona, Black Lives Matter. There's a lot of issues, like political stuff. There's so many issues and things going on in the world. I'm not saying to avoid those things at all, because it's important for us to stay educated and read, of course. But I will say taking time off has been way more enjoyable than I thought it was. Part of me is like, oh, I'd probably miss it, or, this is how I express myself and everything. And it's been a relief and really refreshing to just check out for a bit and focus on some real shit.
Like getting a divorce.
Right. Mental fortitude, all the things. Yeah. I totally agree.
Thank you for sharing that. I know it's a tough thing to talk about.
Yeah. It's these things are not easy, but it's also life. And I've just envisioned this lately, which is, there's this kind of like dark hole that I've been living in for a little bit, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's really bright. And I'm feeling very optimistic, and it's not just because of the divorce, but I see this future of mine, which is me being very proud of myself, and me being very just like truly knowing who I am, what I want, what my values and my principles are, and like sticking to my truth. And it's exciting, because I feel like now I can truly allow myself to be everything I am, because now I can. Like, not that I was denied a lot of that within my marriage, but it's exciting to kind of recreate yourself solely as your own human, your own being, right? And I mean, I was with my ex-husband for all of my 20s. We were together when I was 21, and then I got divorced when I was 30. So like my whole 20s was being married. And
would you say that was too young?
So we got married a month after I turned 24. So I was just barely 24. We got married.
You couldn't even legally rent a car.
Yeah, I know.
This is a completely separate issue, but this is kind of how fucked up things are. I can go to war for my country, but I can't legally buy a drink. I have to be a certain age to see boobies or violence in a movie.
Boobies?
Yeah, like a rated R movie, right? Like,
yes.
Like, I'm 16 and I'm the biggest dumbass in the world, but now I'm responsible for my life and the lives of other people on the road by getting a driver's license. Like, and then I can get married, but I can't legally rent a car. Like, none of this makes any sense to me.
Right. And, you asked, like, was that too young? And I'll be honest and kind of say this as, like, a general broad answer, but I just think when you're in your early 20s, you still don't really know who you are, no matter how much you think you know who you are. And I kind of had this, like, vision for my life and kind of felt like that was the correct step for me when I was that young. And, yeah, I look back now, and I believe that I just did not know who I truly was. And I think people grow together or they don't. And it's okay, because we all go through life and we learn things, we have experiences, we go through stuff, and it shapes us. It highlights what's important for us. And I think, and it's okay to not always grow with somebody. If it's not right, I think it's okay to not grow with somebody.
Which is why I said congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah.
How many people get married, not necessarily to the wrong person, but they grow apart, and for whatever reason, religious conviction, they just don't want to quit. They feel like it's a failure if they do quit. They stay with that person way too long. And I remember my divorce attorney saying something pretty profound, because I was broken up, and she's like, just be thankful that this is happening now. She's like, I have clients that come in their 70s and 80s and get divorced, and they've been married for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And at that point, when you've been married to someone that long and you separate, there's this real feeling that your entire life has been a waste. And if you're 80 years old, how much time do you have after that divorce to recreate yourself and experience the life post-divorce? And it's, even if you do, I mean, let's be honest, right? Like, how much Viagra can you take at that point?
Of course you had to throw that in there.
Of course. Today's episode is brought to you by Viagra.
Oh, man.
So, it's an interesting thing, divorce, in the context of, yes, it represents the failure of a marriage, but it represents the growth of us as individuals if we allow that. And if we don't look at it as this big tragedy, even though it's a trauma, but as the opportunity for us to grow as individuals and set ourselves up for the next evolution of our lives. And whether that's marriage, whether that's just recognizing that maybe marriage is not the future, right? Marriage came around at a time when the average life expectancy was like 35. Yeah, you get married when you're 16. Worst case scenario, you're stuck with someone for 20 years.
Right.
Now, you got married when you're 24. If you live to be 150, that's 125 years with someone.
And I mean, honestly speaking, like, how many shifts in life do people have throughout their life where it's like they are, they're finding out what they really like, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but you go through so many changes within a few years. Could you imagine another 120 years?
I read once in a clinical research study that the average person goes through this kind of evolutionary phase every 10 years. And so if you're going through one, your husband is going through one, how many decades does it take before you guys are no longer, in the same spot?
Right. And I also don't want to highlight, that divorce is inevitable or anything for anyone. It's like, sure, we're living longer and everything, and I still believe there are people who can stay together for a long time. My parents have been together for their 36-year wedding anniversary was just last week. And so it's like, that's, go mom and dad. And
congratulations.
Right. And so I still think it's possible, but the longer we live, I also don't know. My thoughts might change on that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I've really thought a lot about this, and having interviewed a number of people kind of on the therapy side of things and really looking at the modern relationships through Single Parents Daily, I think I've come to this inescapable conclusion that marriage for the most part is dead. And here's why. This is all going to tie in nicely, is there's a lack of mental fortitude. Marriage isn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're living with someone, you're cohabitating with someone, maybe you're raising children together. You know, you're going through everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe it's financial problems, maybe it's a pandemic. Domestic violence calls to police are up 400% through COVID right now.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show that, you know, in cases of severe stress, people aren't working together in a relationship, they're fighting. And so technology has given us an opportunity to distract ourselves from the challenge, the mental fortitude, the work of going into a marriage in a way unlike any other time in history, right? So if two people are married and there's a problem, it's easy for one person or both people to pick up that phone, and whether it's through an app, a Tinder, a Bumble, a social media, and just, rather than working with their partner, seek solace and seek connection elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing such, you fundamentally undermine or erode the foundation of a marriage. So mental fortitude really plays a strong role in how successful our marriages are. And I just don't think that we're the same country that's morbidly obese and why we have the highest level of deaths in the nation, even though we're the most technologically advanced. That same mental fortitude that causes that, you know, that epidemic of obesity is probably in a lot of ways the same mental fortitude problem that causes infidelity or causes those distractions, which makes it possible for two people to grow apart instead of working together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of, I don't know, it makes me think a little bit. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but, you know, in order for a marriage to work, it takes mental fortitude. And it also takes mental fortitude if you decided that it's not right for you anymore. It also takes that mental fortitude to leave too, or make a radical shift or change in your life. So I see it both ways, right? Like it takes so much effort and strength to make relationships work, you know, whatever relationship that is. It also takes a tremendous amount of mental fortitude to decide if something's not correct anymore and then make that change in your life when that's been such a pillar of who you've been for so long. Especially, like, I mean, imagine if you're 80 years old and all of a sudden you're like, you know what, shit, I can't do this anymore. After 50 years or something of being married, like, I'm done. Like, at what point do you just stay because you've been together for 50 years? But, you know, I think about that.
Yeah, and you're right. It's mental fortitude is it's a constant look at ourselves. It's that constant feedback loop where are we doing things for the right reasons? Are we doing them because of our principles and values, or are we doing things because it feels good? And the immediate gratification society that we live in right now tends to forget about principles and values and make those subservient to this feels good. This is where Instagram, and I'm sure you can talk a lot about this, is where social media gives us that, right? Like, we don't even need that from our partners anymore because we can get it online. Someone gives us validation for who we are, how we look, what we say. And that validation allows us to feel good independent of our relationships. And so the mental fortitude comes in, recognizing that we have to make our principles and values the primary driving force in our lives. And anything outside of that is ancillary.
Right.
The work after my marriage was that constant, how am I setting myself up for success in the future based off of principles and values? But one thing I do want to challenge you on, it's not that you're not going to hurt anyone. It's just that the hurt is not going to come from not living a principle-centered existence. And oftentimes that means the mental fortitude to be brutally honest with someone, whether that's a relationship like, hey, I can't be here anymore.
Right.
And so that's what we kind of come back to. And we'll talk a lot about this in some of our content, is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People might still be the best self-help book out there. And when we start with that principle-centered existence, it really sets us up for success in the future.
Yeah. And I think about that too. Like, would I be would I be this improved version of myself if I didn't go through my divorce, right? And it's through the divorce and through like the absolute shit and pain and like just complete and utter discomfort and horribleness that it brings. It was through that I've been able to find more mental fortitude, but also recreate myself and know that I can be someone that I can be proud of. And there's so many ways to view this as far as mental fortitude, right? And it's very interesting, you know, but yeah, I mean, the time's now and we gotta improve ourselves, stay strong.
Part of what we wanted to talk about in mental fortitude was the alarming statistic of divorces in this country, right? Over 50%. If you're in the military, it's like 65%. If it's second marriages, it's 63%. If you get married a third time, forget about it. Just, you know.
Why even get married a third time?
Exactly. Walk into the courthouse and fill out the marriage certificate and the divorce paperwork at the same time, because that's how it's going to go.
Like I don't think I don't ever think I want to get married again, but like I totally see why. And you know, yeah, I think that second marriage, you kind of like really understand who you are, what you want. You're a little bit older, you've had the experience, so you kind of know for sure if that person's right for you. But I feel like if you're on your third, it's like, well, are you sure about this?
Yeah. Well, now here's an interesting thing that we found, though, in all of the research is that second marriages, one of the reasons that they fail is that the second marriage takes place so quickly after the first marriage. And oftentimes people are hurt, they're alone, they don't know how to be alone, they don't know how to work on themselves. And so they seek solace in the arms of another. And that trauma can build a relationship, but it's not a healthy relationship. And so that second marriage can come about rather quickly and then end in divorce. On a third marriage, the same thing, right? People, if you forget the past, are condemned to repeat it. They just get stuck in these patterns. But one of the things that we found was a trigger for most people was social media, is constantly seeing the other person doing, living their life.
Oh, like still following them on social.
Yeah.
And gotcha.
And I will say this, one of the greatest things that I think happened after my marriage was my ex blocked me. And in that respect, I didn't have an insight into her life. In the beginning, it was easy.
You were just like unshackled from
now,
it. Yeah.
In the beginning, one of the hardest parts, and this is where the work really came in, is not having that insight, especially knowing that my daughter was there and not understanding what my daughter was doing. I was coming up with a lot of scenarios of my own, like, this is what's going on. Once I learned to stop that rumination and just recognize that when my daughter was with my ex, that was her time there. When she was with me, that was my time. Really gave me the freedom to explore the life that I needed to explore. And so my comment to this one, my thing is, we started talking about divorce. Mental fortitude is really a great test for that. But my recommendation for everybody is unfriend or unfollow your ex. It is not worth it. And you will find it is a drug. Like, ask someone to unfollow their ex and watch them, like, their hand shakes if they go to that button, because it's like.
And why are we like it's such a thing, right? Like, we mentioned this because it's a thing. Why are people so obsessed with knowing what's going on with that person, right? I mean, what is it about it? Is it you're curious if they're seeing somebody, you're curious if they're enjoying their life,
Most of the time it's ego making that call, right? And the ego says that I don't want that other person to be happy. And so what we see when people is like, we want to see the train wreck that is their life. We want to see that their life is less without us. And that's a shitty place to operate from.
Yeah.
And
our time is so much more valuable.
It is. And so my big, and of course this is not everybody, but this is definitely a lot of the people that we've interviewed. So it does come back to this idea that if you can sever that tie, that digital tie, you can begin the healing process so much faster.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to do, right? Because our lives sometimes are very interconnected. But when you allow that person, both mentally, physically, and in all other ways, the freedom to go off and live their life, you wish them all of the best, all the happiness, that's when your healing begins. And it was when I stopped wanting my ex-wife to be miserable because I wasn't there, I started to heal a lot faster. When I wanted her to be happy, And I didn't care what the catalyst for that was.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted her to provide a better home for my daughter. I wanted her to be with someone who, loved my daughter. Once I took my ego out of the equation, it opened up this world that I just couldn't have even comprehended before that.
Right.
And a big part of that is, like, I don't need to know what she's doing. Social media what she does in her life is her business.
Right.
We don't need to know what's going on in each other's lives.
Exactly. And that's when you can truly focus on what you need to.
We're going to bring Dr. Laura back. I think that she's got some great tips on the mental fortitude piece and how do we really build that resilience, that mental resilience.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of other people that we've really been excited to wait until the rebranding of Complete Human was done to bring on the show. And so we're really excited to bring you guys some of that content. We're going to talk a lot more about the physical health and wellness, which is going to include a lot more of the biooptimization piece. How are we using diagnostic tools to really address underlying issues and then tackle those issues head on? We're going to talk a lot about spiritual abundance, right? What are the things that we can do to really grow that? And how does mental fortitude, physical health, spiritual abundance all lead to the planetary connection?
Right.
And we really feel that these 4 pillars are kind of a roadmap to life success. And whatever course you navigate, to get to that journey or to get to that destination, these really provide the ultimate tool in the toolbox to help people along the way. So very excited to talk a lot about those. Guys, I think that a lot of what we've talked about here on divorce, about some of the tips and tricks that we've used for mental fortitude are great fodder, but we'd love to hear from you guys on Instagram, even though I've spent the last half hour kind of bashing it. You know what? Send us a note on MySpace.
Oh, God. Is that even still a thing?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
It's making a comeback.
But I also want to highlight, you guys, like these 4 pillars we're talking about. Evan and I wrote a ebook that's on our website, The 4 Pillars of Epigenetic Change, and we touch on all these, and we spent a decent amount of time putting this together as a free resource for you guys. So head over to the website, too, and check that out. I think we did well on it.
We're going to find out.
We're going to find out.
If you don't like it, please don't leave us a comment. If you love it, leave us a comment.
Right, exactly.
No, leave us some comments on this one, guys. I think as a community, one of the things that we would love to hear from our audience is, what do you guys utilize to really build mental fortitude? What are some of the tools in your toolbox? And as a community, we don't have all of the answers. And we want to make sure that...
I'm open to more suggestions, so... Help a girl out.
Help a girl out. All right. On that note, I think that's all we've got here. So thank you again for tuning in to another edition of the Complete Human Podcast with your hosts,
Janna Breslin.
And Evan DeMarco.
And Mayday Breslin.
Oh, Mayday. Yeah. May, shut it.
If you guys watched our first initial episode, you'll understand why we just said that.
And if not, go back and watch it.
Yeah, go back and watch the first one. Anyway,
from the 3 of us, we really appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to follow us on iTunes or whatever platform you use to subscribe to your podcast. Subscribe to this one, like us, leave us a review. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see more of. And until next time.
We'll see you guys next time.
Ciao, ciao.